Before the unraveling that transformed my life, my days were defined by simplicity. I grew up in a small town where summers were spent with my friends playing pickup games and winters involved skating on frozen ponds. College shifted that routine into a fast-paced blur of classes, parties, and ambitious dreams. It was during this transformative time that I met Lee, a radiant, confident young woman who captured my attention from the moment I laid eyes on her. We connected over shared study sessions and spontaneous conversations, gradually intertwining our lives until the thought of separation seemed impossible. Our connection matured, filled with equal parts affection and shared challenges. Marriage followed soon after graduation, a seamless step forward. Life had its pressures, but we found a rhythm that worked. I balanced my role as a government contractor with creative side projects, while Lee climbed the ladder in public relations. Our twin daughters, Betsy and Linda, became the focal point of our days, solidifying our bond as parents. One ordinary evening, my quiet world shifted. I stayed up late, engrossed in a series of YouTube videos on my laptop. To the right, an assortment of cued clips awaited autoplay. I watched a highlight reel featuring one of my favorite basketball stars, Larry Big Al Johnson, who had a reputation for stunning last-second plays. His long, blonde hair, swept back in a ponytail, gave him a charismatic presence, akin to a movie idol. Big Al had been part of my college memories, a familiar face on campus, and later a pro drafted by the Wizards, the local team I followed closely. Though he had retired 3 years ago to become a sports presenter, his legacy was a mix of admiration and nostalgia for me. The next video had nothing to do with basketball. It was a news clip of Big Al dancing sensually with a stunning blonde in a Miami club, my wife Lee. The clip ended with them in a deep kiss. It had been filmed an hour ago and just posted under the headline, "Big Al, Another Conquest." I downloaded it and called Lee, but she didn't answer. She was supposedly at a work conference in Miami, along with Bart Kovach, a friend of mine. I called Bart, and he answered immediately. "Bart, it's Marty. Do you know where Lee is right now?" I asked. There was a brief pause before Bart replied, "Marty, this is bad. She's with Big Al." "Bart, I need details. This video is going viral, and by morning, everyone, including my kids, will have seen it. Has she been with him this whole time?" I pressed. "They've been here for 3 days and are leaving tomorrow. They hit it off right after we arrived, probably reconnecting from college. She attends the meetings during the day, but she hasn't been staying in her room at night." "I'm really sorry, Marty," Bart said. "Will you see her in the morning?" I asked. "She's supposed to catch a flight. I'll see if she shows up, but I doubt she will," Bart replied. "If she plans on coming home, tell her not to," I said firmly. "I'll let her know if she asks," Bart said. "Thanks, Bart. Goodbye." Lee and I met in college during our junior year in a math class. On the first day, I noticed her sketching alone, surrounded by shy guys. I took the seat next to her. She looked up, smirked, and said, "Smart choice." I introduced myself. "I'm Lee Moore." "I'm Lee Martin," she replied, smiling. "If we get married, no need to change monograms." We laughed as class began. After class, we walked to the student union. She had striking green eyes, blonde hair, and an easy smile. She joked about being surprised no one sat beside her and mentioned usually having to fend guys off. "I have a boyfriend, though," she added, cutting off any ideas. We met twice a week for class, and one day I asked her for help with a problem. She agreed to tutor me at a diner on Noyes Street, setting boundaries due to her boyfriend. "Deal," I said, grateful. During our study sessions at the diner, I got to know Lee much better. Our conversations naturally drifted beyond math, and we quickly found a connection. One day, while our table was cluttered with textbooks, a tall, broad-shouldered man approached. Lee glanced up and greeted him with her radiant smile. "Marty, this is my boyfriend, Rashad. Rashad, meet Marty from my math class," she said. I stood up and extended my hand. Rashad, who was black, stood about 5'8" inches with a medium build, weighing around 220 pounds. He shook my hand firmly and sat down next to Lee. We put our books aside as Rashad looked at me and asked, "So, what brings you to this math class with Lee and the other nerds?" "I need an advanced math course for my chemistry major," I explained. "It's also useful for programming." The three of us started chatting about why different majors often require seemingly unrelated courses. The conversation was lively, and I quickly realized Rashad was sharp and engaging. "So what are you studying?" I asked him. "Physical training," Rashad replied. "I play hockey, but my backup plan is to teach high school. Ideally, I'd like to become a PE teacher." "Good plan," I said. "Better than mine. Chemists and programmers do get hired, but I'm not quite sure by whom yet." Rashad chuckled. And what about you, Lee? I'm studying business, she said, a confident smile crossing her face. I like the idea of making money. As the semester went on, I spent more time with Lee. I had an off-campus apartment and invited her and Rashad over for dinner one evening. Rashad brought his neighbor Stephanie, who was gorgeous and had just finished high school. She and I had a casual friends with benefits relationship. The dinner went well. I made fish stew, spinach salad, and we had cookies and ice cream. The women drank wine while Rashad and I had beer. Lee and Rashad left around midnight after we played bridge. All four of us surprisingly enjoyed it. None of us had partnered up before, but it got competitive. Rashad and Stephanie teamed up, while Lee and I were on the other team. Lee had a unique bidding style that I picked up on, and we managed to pull ahead and win. Stephanie stayed the night. She was beautiful and passionate, but we both knew our relationship was just casual. She had a boyfriend back in her hometown. I never asked what he thought about us. That evening turned out to be significant because Lee asked me to join a backup bridge tournament at the Army base. I agreed. Meanwhile, Stephanie somehow got Rashad's phone number, probably at dinner without me noticing. I saw them together 2 days later, walking across campus toward our building. I followed them briefly as they went inside and got in the elevator, which stopped at the 4th floor, where she lived. I wasn't sure what to do. The bridge tournament took place on Friday. 2 days later, I was in my room by the window, reading and watching the activity outside. After a couple of hours, I noticed Rashad leaving through the front door. I decided to walk over to Stephanie's room and knocked. She shouted something before opening the door a moment later. She looked flushed, wearing flip-flops and a tight dress with no bra. "Hey, Steph," I said. "Not now, Marty. I'm not in the mood for company," she replied sharply. Then her expression shifted. "Oh, Marty, you saw it, didn't you?" "Yeah," I admitted. She gave a wry smile. "Well, did you enjoy the show? It might seem wrong on Shad's part, but I don't feel bad. I actually feel great." "Sorry," I said, feeling awkward. "Don't worry about it. I'm figuring out what to do next," she continued. "Just don't mess things up between Lee and Rashad. He's just fun for me like you are. Honestly, not even as much as you. If you were in Lee's shoes, would you want to know if Rashad messed up?" "Yes," I said. "Me too," she replied. The bridge tournament turned out to be a lot of fun. The Army team was impressive at cards, but Lee and I managed to place 3rd out of 20 teams. Not bad at all. Lee mentioned we'd earned points, though I wasn't sure what that meant. As we walked to my car, she suddenly asked, "Why didn't you tell me about Rashad and Steph?" I couldn't decide whether I should. "How did you find out?" I asked. "Steph told Rashad that you knew. He brought it up," she explained. "I'm sorry. I got curious and ended up seeing them." "What did they say?" Lee asked. "We're taking a break for a few weeks to figure things out," I said. "Oh, okay," she replied. Then she looked at me and said, "Marty, I want you to take me to your place. If you want to, that is." "Oh, I definitely want to," I answered. I drove faster than usual to my apartment. We hurried inside, and once the door closed, Lee kissed me deeply. She pressed her body against mine, and I responded by pressing my arousal against her. She pulled back, grabbed me, and led me to the bedroom. I quickly removed my shirt and pants, including my underwear. Lee was already undressed except for her underwear and sandals. I knelt down and slid her underwear off slowly. Sex with Lee was incredible. I brought her to climax twice, and the 3rd time we finished together. Oh, Marty, oh my God. I believed her. I'd always thought we were meant for each other. I'm average-sized in pants. Maybe a bit more, but I focused on pleasing her, which worked well that night. Lee rested for a bit, then started exciting me again. I returned the favor, and it worked perfectly. She climaxed strongly, and I followed soon after. We lay there for 20 minutes, gently caressing each other. I got up to use the bathroom. She followed. "Shower?" she asked in a sultry voice. We took a long shower where I pressed her against the smooth wall and made love to her. Afterward, we cleaned up and returned to bed, eventually falling asleep. The next morning, I got up to brush my teeth, and Lee came in just as I was finishing. I handed her a spare toothbrush. Once we both took care of my morning breath, we addressed my morning arousal. During breakfast, Lee asked, "Am I as good as Stephanie? Am I as good as Shad?" We looked at each other, then she smirked. "He's bigger, but you're better. Steph is great, but you're amazing." From that day forward, we were together. Lee practically moved in with me. Rashad was against it, but there wasn't much he could do. He soon found someone else and often spent time with Stephanie, too. In his senior year, Big Al moved into our building on the 4th floor. Sometimes I saw him with Stephanie. He didn't live with her, but they were frequently spotted coming and going together. We exchanged greetings until one evening Steph invited us over for dessert. Big Al was there. It was a pleasant evening, and I found Big Al polite, intelligent, and maybe overly attentive to Lee. Perhaps Steph noticed too, as we weren't invited over again. Lee and I got married at 20. Right after college, I started working as a programmer for the government at the Pentagon. Lee got a job at a public relations firm, focusing on advertising for corporations aiming to influence government officials, senators, congressmen, and agency reps. I inherited a house from my grandfather, located close to work. The lease had ended, so we moved in. The house had 3 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, a garage converted into a living space, and a finished basement, which needed some work. I tackled that project with the help of a high school friend who ran a construction business in Virginia. Lee became pregnant, and at 22, we welcomed twin daughters, Betsy and Linda. Not identical, but quite a handful. Lee took a year off, and I reduced my work hours to give the twins the care they needed. By the end of that year, I switched to contractor status, allowing me to work from home. Lee returned to work part-time and went full-time when the girls turned 4. By then, I had established a solid daily routine with them, and my contractor work was thriving. I earned more, though without benefits. Lee's job grew increasingly demanding, mostly because she allowed it to. She was ambitious and accomplished a lot. My work was more creative. Some of it was for the government, while some was my own. I had 2 promising system ideas that I'd been refining for a while. Lee made good money. When the girls were 13 and in elementary school, I was 35 and in good shape. I jogged and played table tennis, which might not sound challenging, but try it against skilled players. Before seeing the video of Lee and Big Al, I would have said our bed life was satisfying, at least for me. However, after 15 years together, while I didn't think we were stagnant, I suspected Lee did. I looked up Big Al's address, just 3 miles north of us. I wondered if what I saw in Miami was recent or had been going on for a while. I also had more questions. I asked the girls to do DNA swabs, and I did one myself. This was the day after I told them about the YouTube video. I needed to protect them from any surprises at school. It was Friday, and they had school with tests and group activities. At 10 a.m., Lee called. I saw it was her and let it go to voicemail. "Marty, pick up. Please, Marty. I love you. I made a mistake. I'll be home this afternoon." "Oh, God." Her sobs were audible. One of the house improvements I made was an electronic entry system, so I changed the code. The converted garage stood unused but was fully furnished. I moved Lee's clothes and essentials there. My mother and Lee's mother both called, wanting to know what I planned to do. I didn't know and said as much. I logged into Lee's Gmail and went through a month of emails, old and recent. I checked the trash folder, no messages from Big Al. There were some work-related emails and a few about the conference, with hints from a coworker who was also headed to Miami. Lee's flight was due at noon. I ignored her calls and asked a friend at the airport to keep an eye on arrivals. He saw Lee exit with her work group looking around. He discreetly filmed her on his phone as she collected her luggage and lingered by the exit. 5 minutes later, Big Al appeared, also scanning the area and heading for the baggage claim. My friend followed him. Lee, holding her suitcase, noticed Big Al, turned, and walked away. Big Al retrieved his suitcase and went outside. Lee was waiting for a cab when Big Al approached her and spoke. She shook her head. A taxi arrived and the dispatcher directed both into it. My friend sent me the video. 20 minutes later, a taxi pulled up in front of the house. Only Lee stepped out, looking frantic when she realized her code no longer worked. She knocked and rang the doorbell repeatedly. I opened the door and she burst into tears. "I'm so sorry, Marty. I never imagined things would turn into such a mess," she sobbed. "You don't live here anymore, Lee. Your things are in the garage. Until you find a place, maybe you should stay with Al," I said coldly. "Oh, Marty, there's nothing between us. I love you," she pleaded. "You publicly humiliated me and made me a laughingstock. The girls at school, who knows what they're going through because of this? You're cruel. Get out of my sight." Her face fell as she stumbled backward. She sat down on a lawn chair and cried. Our neighbor, Mrs. Cunningham, noticed and came over to talk to her. After their conversation, Lee went to Mrs. Cunningham's house. I called Lee's mother and let her know Lee was nearby and could use some support. Ellen, her mother, sounded indifferent, but agreed to come by in an hour. I sat in the kitchen sipping coffee, trying to process everything. The events of the night before felt like a blur. I called an attorney I knew who referred me to family law attorney Joan Ellis. I scheduled an appointment for Monday, but 30 minutes later, Miss Ellis called me back. Mr. Martin, this is Joan Ellis. You set an appointment for Monday, correct? I'm calling because of your wife and the basketball player? Yes, but how did you know? The video doesn't mention her name, I said, surprised. A reporter uncovered it. Big Al is big news here, especially when it comes to gossip. I thought it would be best not to wait until Monday. Can you come tomorrow morning at 10? Yes, 10 works, I replied. Please write a brief history of your relationship with your wife and any interactions with Mr. Johnson, if any. I'll also need financial statements, if possible, she instructed. We ended the call, and she advised against making any rash decisions. I hung up, and my phone rang again. Without thinking, I answered. It was Big Al. Marty, I called to apologize, he said. Go to hell. I'll do everything I can to ruin your life, you idiot, I snapped. Listen, it's not just me. It's her too. It just happened, he said, trying to defend himself. I had a happy marriage before she went to Miami. We have 2 kids. You're a fool. If you see me, you better run. I said it calmly, with no raised voice or emphasis. There was a pause, and he hung up. Now I had his number. I logged into our shared phone account and checked Lee's call history. I saw Al's number appear only after she reached Miami, just twice. I didn't have access to today's calls. I assumed their meeting was unplanned. I checked Wiz's schedule. They'd had a game in Miami on Wednesday where Big Al was the MC, confirming he was there for work. The doorbell rang. My parents and Lee's parents were outside. Lee was gone. I let them in and offered drinks, which they declined. They sat down while I stood at the living room entrance. Well, I prompted. My mom, Lacey, spoke up. We had a quick talk outside. We came to see how you're holding up. I sat there, quietly sobbing, my grief evident. When I finally straightened up and looked at my mom, she later said my expression was so full of devastation and pain that she couldn't fathom how it could ever be healed. My dad spoke up. Is there any chance you'd be willing to talk to Lee? She asked us to check. Why? I replied bitterly. Nothing she says will matter. She destroyed our family. And it wasn't just a one-time thing. She didn't even try to hide it from her co-workers, and now everyone knows. Ellen, Lee's mother, intervened. I know she made a terrible mistake, Marty. A huge one. And she realizes that. But you have your daughters, and you and Lee have shared so many years together. Maybe it's worth trying to save if you can. I don't see her as my wife anymore, Ellen. And I never will again. She's just the mother of my children now. Ellen's eyes softened with empathy. You're hurting, Marty. Your pride is deeply wounded. You need time to move past that. Your marriage can't end because of just a few days. Ellen, I care about you and respect you, but what your daughter did is beyond repair. Please, don't ask me to consider reconciliation. It's not going to happen, I said firmly. She raised her hands in a silent gesture. I added, all of you should start thinking about what life will look like after the divorce or once it's official. My mom started crying. Just wait a few days, Marty. Just a few. Your dad and I can take the girls for the weekend. We'll take them to the lake, I agreed. Just then, the girls arrived home from school and knocked because the code had changed. They were surprised to see their grandparents. They wanted to tell me about their day. It wasn't all that bad, I said. Betsy was close friends with Sharon Davis, who asked her about the video. Betsy admitted she hadn't seen it, but was aware of it. Sharon wanted to know if her parents were getting a divorce. Betsy said she didn't know. Linda didn't know either, but I did. We'll handle this later, I said. They weren't overly emotional. Linda asked, Where's Mom? She's next door, Ellen replied. Your grandparents need to talk to your dad, but I think you girls should pack for the weekend. You'll be staying with us and we'll take you to the lake. They were worried, but wanted to see Lee. We sent them to pack. I was against them seeing Lee, but the others thought it was necessary. I said she could see the girls on the porch, I insisted. After they packed, Ellen went to get Lee. Their suitcases were put in the car and they waited on the porch with their grandparents. Lee and Ellen approached. The girls didn't run to her, but stood waiting. From my bedroom window on the second floor, I could see and hear everything. Lee knelt in front of them and they all hugged. Mom? Linda asked with a trembling voice. What did you do? How could you be with that man? She sobbed through the question. I made a terrible mistake, Lee whispered. I need to figure out why. But I love you girls and your dad very much. Betsy wasn't convinced. She was the tougher one. If you loved Dad, you couldn't have done this. And it's all over the video. How could you? She cried, tears streaming down her face. Lee started crying too. "I'm so sorry, it was a terrible mistake." Lee hugged Linda while Betsy pushed her away. Lee stood up and ran to her father's car. My parents put the girls in their van and everyone went their separate ways. I sat on my bed, stunned and heartbroken. Then anger surged within me. I felt rage building and started shouting and thrashing. I went down to the basement and pounded on the heavy bag, imagining every hit landing on Larry or Lee. My hands turned sore and bruised by the time I was done. I resolved that both of them would face consequences. After tending to my injured hands, I had a drink and went to bed. It took a while to fall asleep, but I finally did. The next morning, I went for an intense, long run. Then I gathered my financial documents and went to the lawyer's office. Joan Ellis was a slender woman in her 40s with dark hair and eyes, dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt. We shook hands. "Sorry for the casual look. It's Saturday, and I was doing yard work," she said. "No problem. You look fine," I replied. She smiled. "Let's head to the conference room," she said, leading the way. I began, "Miss Ellis, I want to understand my options for divorcing my wife." "I can explain that, but are you sure you want a divorce? It's a difficult path and you have 2 kids, right?" she asked. "Yes, twin girls, 13 years old, and I want custody," I said firmly. "Let's circle back to whether you really want to end your marriage. Has something like Miami happened before, or is this a first?" she probed. "I don't think she's done this before, but I can't be certain," I answered. "So you can't accept it if it's true?" she asked. "No," I said without hesitation. "Okay, let's talk about finances," Joan said. We discussed our incomes and roles with the children. Joan was pleased that the house belonged to me before marriage, and that the girls had always lived there. She felt our work schedules and my role as a stay-at-home parent would likely favor me in custody proceedings, though nothing was guaranteed. I made about the same amount as Lee, but my income was less consistent. Joan thought neither of us would be required to pay child support. "The non-custodial parent will be obligated to pay child support," she clarified. I asked how soon the divorce process could begin. "Maybe a week to draft and file the paperwork," she estimated. "I think you should wait a bit longer. People change their minds, and you might be ordered to attend counseling," she advised. "Is there any way to avoid that? I don't want to talk to her one-on-one," I said. "You'll need to have some conversations, but we can try to minimize them," she replied. She noticed my bandaged hands. "What happened?" she asked. "I got angry last night and took it out on the heavy bag. Forgot my gloves," I admitted. "At least you didn't confront Mr. Johnson or your wife," she remarked. "Speaking of him, is there any way to sue him? He should pay," I said, my tone hardening. "There's no option to sue for infidelity or alienation of affection in this state or in Florida," Joan explained. "He should pay," I muttered, my voice steady, which seemed to unnerve Joan. "I'll see what can be done, but please, no violence," she cautioned. "No promises. He has to face consequences. I won't sleep if he walks away without any," I replied. "Mr. Martin, I need to tell you that while our discussions are confidential, if I believe you're planning a violent act, I may need to report it," she said. "Or maybe not," I said. "Joan, you'll never have that kind of knowledge," I assured her. "Thanks for saying that," she said, sounding relieved. I signed an agreement with her and paid the fee, asking her to have the documents ready as soon as possible. When I got home, it was already noon, and my father, Leland, called. "Hello? How are you holding up today?" he asked. "I'm fine. I just got back from seeing a lawyer," I replied. "Oh, moving fast. What did they say?" he asked, a note of concern in his voice. "We discussed what a divorce would look like," I said bluntly. "Marty, you need to take a step back. Don't rush this. It's a major decision and you shouldn't make it hastily," he cautioned. "Dad, when Lee let that guy touch her, she was already done in my mind. The fact that it happened more than once just makes it worse. But once was enough," I said, my tone hardening. "Your mother thinks she hurt you too deeply for any chance of recovery. I think she might be right, but still I want you to slow down and give Lee a chance to explain," he said, his voice softening. "What could she possibly say that would change anything?" I asked. There was a pause before he admitted, "Okay, I can't think of anything." "Exactly my point," I said. We talked about how the girls were feeling. Linda was sad and withdrawn, while Betsy was angry and struggling to keep her emotions in check. My mom was working with them, reassuring them that they weren't losing their parents and that both of us would still be there for them. We ended the call. The house phone rang with no caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. It was Lee. "Marty, if you're there, please pick up. I need to talk to you. Marty, I need this. Please, I know I messed up. You're the only one I've ever been able to talk to about serious things. Am I going to lose you? No, please. I know you're angry and confused. I'm so sorry." She started crying before hanging up. As she spoke, I found myself crying too. I went downstairs again, this time putting on gloves before hitting the bag. Even with gloves, it hurt. I punched and kicked the bag until I was exhausted. Afterward, I took a shower. Some guys might drink in a situation like this, but I preferred to run or use the punching bag. I began thinking about how to deal with Larry. One thing that kept coming to mind was a tool I had found. I owned 2 registered pistols, a .45 caliber revolver and a .40 caliber S&W pistol. But one day, while jogging, I noticed something shiny in the tall grass. It was a Taurus .380 self-loading pistol. I took it home. It was loaded and in working condition, though the serial number had been removed, making it illegal. I cleaned it and once tested it at a shooting range. It was accurate. I considered the idea of using the tool on Larry, but quickly pushed those thoughts aside. I had my girls, and I couldn't risk ending up in prison because of him. It wasn't the right time to confront Lee. I knew eventually we'd have to talk, but the idea of seeing her now made me feel sick. Alone in the house, a wave of despair washed over me. It felt like a heavy blanket suffocating me, pinning me to the couch. Breathing became difficult and suddenly panic set in. I jumped up knowing I needed to move and went for a fast walk. My path led me by Larry's house. I didn't linger but noted that security seemed minimal. The house was large and new, close to the street with a basketball hoop in the driveway. No car was in sight, but there was a large garage in the back. I walked by, made a loop, and passed again, discreetly taking a few photos with my phone. I then walked past Lee's parents' house further north. Their cars were parked out front, and Lee's car was still in our garage. I hurried to a store, bought a prepaid cell phone and a Diet Pepsi, and then returned home. It was 3 p.m. on a Saturday. I made a sandwich, though I only managed to eat a few bites. The moment I stopped moving, the despair crept back. I took out the .380 pistol and drove out of town to a friend's property with an open shooting range. No one was there. He and his family were in Florida. I shot through 2 boxes of ammo. The pistol was cheap but reliable, slightly heavier than a high-end model. On my way back, I stopped at a pharmacy and picked up 2 neoprene thigh wraps. Back at home, I fashioned a body holster to hold the .380 at my lower back. I tested running with it and found it worked well. My phone had been off all day, and I hadn't checked emails. When I turned it on, there were 11 voicemails, around 20 texts from family, colleagues, and friends, and countless emails. The voicemails were from Lee, Ellen, and my mom, all saying similar things. "Please contact us. We need to talk." The texts echoed the same, including some from my father and 2 recent ones from Lee's father, Milt. Milt's messages stood out from the rest. In the first, he apologized for Lee's actions and expressed regret for not raising a more responsible daughter. In the second, he asked if I wanted to meet and talk privately, away from the women. I called him, but it went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message, but he called back 3 minutes later. "Marty, I needed a walk to clear my head. I saw you called. What's going on?" he asked. "Milt, can we meet somewhere?" "How about Raymond Park near Hopscourt?" I suggested. "Sure, I can be there in about 30 minutes, he agreed. I put on jeans and slipped my .380 into my pocket, just in case I encountered Larry, who lived half a mile from the park. I drove for 10 minutes and walked past Larry's house on the way. When I arrived, Milt was already there. The park was small and quiet, with only a few people around. We shook hands and sat on a bench near the edge of the court. Milt spoke first. "I wanted to check on you. Ellen and your mom told me you weren't doing well." "I'm not, Milt. I feel worse than I ever have," I admitted. "I understand. When my mom died, it took me a year to feel somewhat normal again. I just worked through it day by day. You should try to do the same," he said gently. "It's easy to say, but hard to do. And it's only been a day," I replied. "For what it's worth, Lee isn't holding up well either. She hasn't eaten since she came to our house and has barely spoken. We're thinking of calling for help. Honestly, you look better than she does," Milt said. "She's dealing with guilt. I don't have that," I said flatly. "I'm sorry, Marty, but the girls need her. They need their mother. I don't understand why she's so shocked by this fallout. She did everything openly. Did she really think no one would find out? That I wouldn't know? It's ridiculous. Even without YouTube, one of her coworkers or friends would have mentioned it eventually. I said, frustration seeping into my voice. I don't think she was thinking clearly, Milt said thoughtfully. She was away from home, caught up in being pursued by a celebrity. I think she let emotions take over when she would normally suppress them. You're kind to think that, Milt. But I believe she's had feelings for Larry since college and thought she could have both. What are you planning to do? He asked. I'm probably going to divorce her. I can't think about her without getting angry. I just hope I don't end up sick over this, I said. I know people are advising you to wait before making any big decisions. But honestly, I don't see how you could return to a normal life with her, Milt said, his voice heavy. Exactly. It's over. I'll wait, but not for long, I replied. Make sure she's prepared. If she's as bad as you say, I'll do what I can to help, Milt offered. We parted ways. As I walked back to my car, parked on a nearby street, I saw Larry dribbling a basketball up the cross street toward the park. My hand moved to my tool. Milt, driving past, saw him and honked. Larry got startled, lost the ball, and chased after it without looking, like an idiot. It wasn't Milt who ran over him. A car coming from the opposite direction, blocked by Milt's, struck him. A big SUV. Before the driver could stop, Larry went over the hood and windshield, landing on the street. Milt kept driving. I ran over to Larry, who was still alive but barely conscious. The SUV driver rushed over, yelling, I already called emergency. The hospital was only about 4 blocks away. Larry recognized me and tried to speak, but no words came out. I watched as he faded. Paramedics arrived within 2 minutes, doing everything they could, but it was too late. Big Al was gone. I felt a mix of relief and betrayal. The police showed up, and I was anxious since the tool I had was illegal, even though I had a concealed carry permit. I answered their questions, gave my name and address, and they let me go. The elderly SUV driver was shaken, and I told him and the police that it wasn't his fault. Larry had just run into the street. An hour later, I drove home, disposed of the .380, and went to Milt's. Lee was there, but I needed to speak to Milt about the accident. Ellen opened the door, noticing my tense expression. Marty, what's wrong? She asked. I need to see Milt, I replied. Milt, she called out, and he came down. I motioned for him to step outside. Big Al is dead, I said. Milt's eyes widened. Did you liquidate him? I saw the tool, Marty. No, he was shot by a car after you honked. He chased a ball into the street. I saw him die. Milt looked shocked. That's an accident. God works in mysterious ways, he said. I managed a grim smile. One of you, either you or Ellen, should tell Lee that her lover is gone. He wasn't her lover, Milt said defensively. But we'll tell her. It'll be on the news soon. How is she doing? I asked. She's not well. She's shattered, Milt replied, his voice heavy. It's strange, I said. At first I felt cheated, but now I just feel relieved. Marty, I want to save my daughter, Milt said, his eyes pleading. She made a huge mistake, but she deserves a chance. If you can find it in yourself, please help her someday. I know it's a lot to ask. I need time, Milt. For now, keep her away from me. I'll try to figure things out, I said, my tone firm. Good job not becoming a butcher, Milt said with a slight smile. We shared a tense laugh and went inside. I drove home and for the first time in days, slept well. The girls called and we talked before bedtime. Sunday was tough. The weather was nice, but I had nothing to distract me from my broken marriage. Despite Milt's words, I knew there was no future for Lee and me. This truth saddened me, but it was reality. I went for a long run by the river, then showered and joined my parents and the girls for a picnic. The twins were in better spirits. They had a video call with Lee, who encouraged them, staying strong. My mom said they only talked about school, avoiding Lee's affair and Larry's end of life. Lee told them she'd see them once she felt better. We enjoyed the day, and while the girls were swimming, I shared with my parents that I had witnessed Larry's accident. They were stunned. You didn't have anything to do with it, did you? My father asked, eyeing me cautiously. No, it was purely a coincidence, I assured him. I was at the park with Milt when Larry ran into the street. Well, I can't say I'm sorry to hear that, my father muttered. May the Lord have mercy on him. We changed the subject. On Monday, Joan Ellis called, unaware I'd been there when Larry died. I explained everything, sensing her amazement and slight suspicion. I understood. It sounded strange. She said the divorce papers would be ready by Wednesday and asked when to serve them. Hold off, I said. Lee's not in good shape. I promised Milt I'd wait. The girls chose to attend school, even though Larry's end of life and last week's outburst were big news. I managed a half day of work for the Army before picking them up after activities. We had homemade pizza for dinner. It was a pleasant evening, but before bed, they asked, Will Mom come back? I don't think things will be the same, I said honestly. I can't see us going back to our old life, but your mom and I will always love you. On Tuesday, Milt and Ellen called, asking to meet at Starbucks. With coffee in hand, Milt said he'd contacted a marriage counselor and asked me to try engaging with Lee. If you file for divorce on infidelity grounds, the court may require counseling, Ellen added. Fine, but I won't fake it. This might not help her, I said. We're not asking you to pretend, Ellen replied. Just take it slow. Listen and talk to Lee. She's terrified after Larry's end of life. We didn't tell her you were there. Our first counseling session was set for Monday at 10 a.m. I arrived on time to avoid waiting with Lee. The counselor, Dr. Sylvia Price, was a warm, welcoming psychologist in her 50s. She led us into her office. Lee and I hadn't spoken until then. She looked pale and nervous. Dr. Price began by explaining her work, including cases involving infidelity. She asked me, Marty, what's your goal for counseling? I want to move forward with my life, I said. I want to be a good father, but I don't see reconciliation happening. Turning to Lee, Dr. Price asked, what about your goals? Lee hesitated. I want my old life back. Even if it's different, I want to stay married. Dr. Price summarized. Lee attended a conference in Miami, reconnected with a college acquaintance, and it became public. Is that correct? Lee nodded. Yes. I never thought my actions would come out and affect my family. Dr. Price continued. Then why go out with Mr. Johnson, knowing he's famous? Lee sighed. I thought it would be fun. It wasn't near the hotel, and it was fun. But you knew your coworkers would talk and Marty would find out, Dr. Price said. Lee nodded silently. Dr. Price turned to me. Marty, why do you believe the marriage can't be saved? I looked at Lee. She was the person I trusted most, and she betrayed me so easily and publicly. I've experienced loss before, but this pain is worse. I could never trust her, or anyone, again. Lee began to cry, and Dr. Price asked, How do you feel seeing her so upset? Sad and angry, I admitted. What she did was cruel. Not just to me, but to the kids, too. Even if it wasn't intentional, it was reckless. And for what? 3 nights with someone you were infatuated with back in college, I said, fixing my gaze on Lee. Through her tears, Lee said, I don't know why I did it. Dr. Price interjected. Did you have feelings for him in college? Yes, Lee said quietly. He was handsome and popular. He pursued me, but I was with Marty, so I turned him down. Why did you say yes in Miami? I asked, my voice strained. I had been feeling disconnected for months. We were all so busy. When I saw Larry, he hugged me, and I didn't push him away. Everything happened so fast. I don't fully understand it myself, Lee confessed. I scoffed. We had amazing sex the night before you left. Was that all fake? No, it was real, Lee said, her voice breaking. I felt excited on the flight. I feel awful about everything. She started sobbing again. I felt tears welling up, but anger took over, and I left the room. Dr. Price found me in the outer office. Why don't you step into the men's room for a moment, she suggested. I did and returned 15 minutes later. Lee, now calmer, said softly, I'm sorry, Marty, before leaving. Dr. Price turned to me. Marty, how do you feel about Mr. Johnson's end of life? You were there, weren't you? Yes, I saw him die. I felt relieved. It's dark to say, but I could have done it myself. Someone else did, and that felt like a weight lifted, I said bluntly. Why does this mean the end for you? She asked. I was always devoted to my family. This betrayal is too much to bear. I can't picture trusting anyone again. Lee took that from me. Have you thought about what their time together was like? Dr. Price pressed. Yes. I saw the videos. It was clear how much they wanted each other, I said coldly. How did that make you feel? Betrayed, I said, my voice hard. It wasn't just a meaningless fling. Even if we stayed together, I'd always believe she was thinking of him. I wish I could erase those memories for her, if nothing else. Dr. Price sighed. That's hard to overcome. You truly loved her. I did. That's why it hurts so much. She destroyed me, I said. The session ended with Dr. Price asking me to consider living arrangements if we were to separate.
I was tasked with explaining what happened in Miami, why I was so vulnerable, and outlining how reconciliation with Marty might be possible. Before the Miami trip, I felt disconnected and out of touch with the things I used to enjoy. Work had become monotonous, and family life felt repetitive. This had been going on for months, leaving me with an underlying sense of dissatisfaction. I looked forward to the trip, hoping it would bring some change. One of my colleagues, Brady Bean, had been pestering me since he transferred to our office. I easily brushed him off, treating him as an annoyance, but he was persistent. While he wasn't unattractive and had an upbeat personality, I was never interested. When we realized we were both going to Miami, he saw it as a chance for a fling. I made it clear I wasn't interested, though I couldn't deny that his attention was somewhat flattering. Still, I would never cross that line with him. He wasn't tempting enough, and it was too risky. Everything changed when we arrived at the hotel. Larry appeared. He was undeniably attractive, muscular, smooth, and self-assured. When he hugged me enthusiastically, I was instantly caught off guard. I realized that if he pursued me, I wouldn't resist. He seemed to pick up on that, pulling me aside to ask if Marty was with me. When I said no, he mentioned his hotel room and his stay until Friday. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "I want you, and I know you want me." I agreed to have dinner with him, though even now I can't fully understand why I was so willing, like a fool. Marty and I had just had amazing sex the night before I left. I was still feeling its effects, yet being with Larry felt like stepping into another world. I told myself it was only for a few days, far from home with no real consequences. I didn't think about Marty or the fallout. At least, I don't remember considering it. If Larry had been in Virginia, I'm sure I would have said no. But in Miami, I convinced myself it was different. During dinner, it was obvious where the night was heading. We skipped dessert and went straight to his room. Once inside, Larry pulled me close and kissed me, and we quickly undressed. I wasn't thinking about anything except his touch, his body, and the desire between us. There was no build-up. We were too eager. He carried me to the bed, and we had sex, intense and relentless. After multiple climaxes, he finished, and I passed out. He woke me up with kisses, and we started again. I missed breakfast with my team the next morning and barely made it to the meeting. I was thoroughly satisfied and suspected my colleagues could tell. Some gave me sidelong glances, but no one said anything directly. I wondered if anyone might contact Marty, but dismissed it. They had no proof, just guesses. The second night was as intense, though by the third night the excitement had waned. Still, we had dinner in his room and spent hours in bed. Larry suggested going out dancing, and I hesitated before agreeing. That's how I ended up on YouTube, dancing with him. When I watched the video later, knowing Marty had seen it, I felt sick. I saw myself the way Marty must have, his devoted wife, publicly showing desire for another man. After dancing, we returned to the hotel and had sex again. The next morning, I had a flight back home. We had one final round before saying goodbye. When I returned to my room to pack, my roommate, Cindy, mentioned the YouTube video, calling it spicy. I was overcome with horror and realized I was finished. At the airport, I saw Bart Kovach, Marty's close friend. He told me that Marty had seen the video and knew I'd spent my nights with Larry. I was stunned. The flight home was miserable. No one spoke to me. When we landed, I didn't expect Marty to pick me up and waited for a taxi. Larry ended up in the same cab. He apologized for the video, saying he hadn't considered the consequences. I didn't want to talk and asked the driver to drop him off first. When I arrived home, I couldn't make myself go inside. When Marty opened the door, the hurt and anger on his face were too much. I turned and ran. Since then, I've been living at my parents' house, mostly in a daze. I tried speaking to my daughters, but Betsy rejected me and I couldn't blame her. Phone calls were easier, though it took me an hour to prepare for each one. I now go to counseling. After the first session, I felt certain my marriage was over, especially after hearing Marty's pain. His anger and grief were overwhelming, and I don't know how I could ever ask for his trust again. I don't deserve it. Larry is dead, liquidated by a car. When my mom told me, I felt immense sorrow. He had asked me to call him during the taxi ride, but I never did. Now I never could. His end of life left an emptiness inside me. I thought if I ever cheated, I would always remember Larry. Now maybe I won't. I can't shake the guilt that if I'd turned him down, he might still be alive. It doesn't make sense, but somehow it does. I'm completely, utterly lost.
Things at home are slowly improving. The twins are struggling with school, but it's manageable. Betsy stays angry, while Linda misses her mother deeply. I suspect Betsy does too, though she hides it well. Each evening, they video call Lee. She seems a bit better on these calls, but it's hard to tell much in such a short time. Our second counseling session was like the first, except we each had a solo session before meeting together. Dr. Price started with, "Have you thought about what could make reconciliation possible?" I sighed. "Yes, but I couldn't think of anything. Sorry." She pressed on. "Would understanding why Lee got involved with Larry help you trust her again? If you knew the cause, could you find a way to prevent it from happening again?" "That's absurd," I said. "She just wanted Zex with him and thought she'd get away with it." "That's what she said, right?" "But I don't believe her. Sure, she wanted him, but part of me thinks she wanted to get caught." "Why do you think that?" Dr. Price asked. "Good question. Ask her, Doc. But it doesn't matter. This won't end in reconciliation. You can't overcome a betrayal like this. It wasn't just the act. It was the stupidity of thinking she'd get away with it. That can't be fixed." Dr. Price paused. "If she did want to get caught, could that change anything for you?" "No," I said bitterly. "It would mean she wanted out. Away from me, from our family. Maybe she craved drama or excitement. If Larry were still alive, she'd probably be with him now." When we met together, Lee kept asking for forgiveness. I didn't believe it. Even if her apology was sincere and her actions made sense, I couldn't stay with her. It would be like living next to a ticking bomb, always waiting for it to go off again. By the end of the session, I'd made my decision. I called my lawyer and asked him to file for divorce. There was no other way.
Today, I was served divorce papers. I keep writing in this journal, hoping for future clarity. During this week's counseling, Marty seemed less angry, more resigned. It was clear we were done. I've read about grief stages, and acceptance is one of the last. Marty has accepted our marriage is over, with my affair as the final blow. The divorce papers didn't surprise me. I saw this coming. Now, I need to contact a lawyer. I returned to work this week, and the atmosphere was cold. Everyone knows about my affair and sees me as the woman who broke her family. Even Brady Bean, who once pursued me, has kept his distance. It's his loss. I know he'll probably approach me, assuming I'm vulnerable, but he's wrong. My lawyer suggested I ask for joint custody of the girls. Since Marty owned the house before our marriage, he'll likely stay there, especially as the main parent. The girls might live with us on alternate weeks if I find a place nearby, or maybe we'll switch weekends. It all feels overwhelmingly sad. I told my lawyer I'd admit to the Miami affair and asked him to speed up the process. I don't want anything from Marty. No money or prolonged fights. We can split the savings evenly. It's painful that years of marriage have come to this. Just broken memories. But at least I didn't end up like Larry. I don't feel sorry for him. He shares the blame. He didn't have to choose me, but he did. I'll never understand why. Dr. Price suggested my dancing, overtly strange behavior, and inability to hide the affair might mean I wanted an exciting new life. I don't believe that. She said Marty thought I wanted to be caught, to escape our marriage. Now I'm free, and I hate it. I have no appetite, no interest in Zex. I don't go out and have turned down Brady Bean multiple times without temptation. It would be easy, but I can't do it. I wonder how long this emptiness will last.
The divorce was finalized today. I received primary custody of the twins who will stay in the house. Lee will have them every other weekend, 2 weeks in the summer, and either Thanksgiving or Christmas. They'll probably get double gifts for Christmas. The settlement has been unchanged for 6 months, as Lee already rented an apartment 2 miles away. I invited Milt and Ellen to visit anytime, and they often do. They also see the girls at Lee's on weekends. I haven't dated seriously, but have gone out with a few divorced friends from our circle, sharing dinners or bowling nights. We spent a week at the house without the kids and were intimate. The Zex was good, but I made it clear to them that after what I've been through, there would be no commitment. Everyone knows what happened, so they understand. A few people believe I'll eventually move past my fears, but I doubt it. This is a long journey without an endpoint. The pain of imagining Lee with Larry is still as sharp as ever, though I try not to dwell on it. The twins have adapted. Linda is kind to Lee, but Betsy holds grudges like me, which might be a problem. I've only shared this concern with Ellen, not Lee. Lee and I barely speak. She knows I prefer it that way. Seeing her is too painful. Ellen mentions that Lee has become reclusive, and I rarely see her. Despite living close and sharing social circles, I don't feel sympathy for her and never will. I never understood why she did it, and I doubt she does either. It seemed like a coincidence of events, her vague discontent, the trip to Miami, and meeting Larry, all aligning to destroy our marriage. A year later, Milt Moore played golf on a Saturday with his old friend Fred Cunningham, an electrical engineer. As they walked from the ninth hole, they spoke in low tones. "How are you holding up, Fred?" Milt asked. Fred nodded slowly. "I'm doing okay. I agreed to follow through as planned, and everything unfolded just like you said it would. He always played golf on Saturdays, even after retirement. It was routine for him. I felt a pang when I saw the news about him running into the street. It was a tough call, but I did what needed to be done. Your horn startled him, and it shocked me too." Milt nodded, a serious look on his face. "It went smoother than I expected, almost as if it was meant to be. I couldn't believe it when he died," Fred continued. "I called emergency, and Marty was there. Later, he said he felt cheated. I wanted him to witness it for closure," Milt said. "He had a tool, and I was worried he might do something drastic. My granddaughters deserved a normal life, and if Marty had been arrested, it would have been because of Lee. Did Larry deserve to die? Hard to say. But Marty and the girls deserved to move on and live." They never spoke about it again, walking side by side down the path. On that Sunday morning, as I woke up, the weight of my recent breakup came over me. Just a year before, my life revolved around family moments and cozy breakfasts with my kids. Now, those memories seemed distant, replaced by the stark reality of divorce and the struggle to navigate life on my own. Mornings were often the hardest, filled with silence where laughter once was. That day, I felt compelled to leave my apartment, to escape the loneliness. The laundromat had become my refuge, a place where I could blend into the hum of daily life, all while quietly dealing with my emotions. Around 7 on a drab Sunday morning, I forced myself out and into the laundromat, feeling sluggish. I wasn't sure if the weather matched my mood, but it felt like every Sunday in the laundromat was dim and lifeless. I'd only started using a laundromat about a year ago. Before that, my wife handled the laundry in our basement laundry room. I moved out a year ago, and 6 months back, she became my ex-wife, leaving the laundry room behind in what used to be my home. My routine now was to go to the laundromat about a mile from my apartment early each Sunday morning. While I didn't love early mornings or laundry, I didn't want this chore to take over my weekend, so I'd get in and out quickly. That way, I avoided the crowd, waiting for a machine, or having to make small talk. After all, weren't Sundays meant for nursing hangovers or reading the paper at leisure? I'd been coming here for about 9 months, and maybe I'd seen her before without paying much attention. But this time was different. The cart she was dragging had a wheel that wobbled slightly, piled high with laundry as she struggled to pull it inside, holding the door open with one hand while steering with the other. I caught this scene as I looked up from the sports section. Being generally decent, I put down the paper, went over and held the door to help her with the cart. She looked up at me with a brilliant smile, showing bright white teeth and warm brown eyes. "Thank you, sir," she said, heading to a line of washers along the back wall. I guess she was around 7 or 8, maybe Hispanic or of mixed heritage. With a head of long, curly brown hair, she was undeniably cute. I turned back, expecting a parent to follow her, but no one did. I felt both uneasy and curious. I watched her load all her clothes into a washer without separating colors from whites, unlike how I'd been taught. She added some detergent from her wagon, dropped in coins, and started the machine. Then she pulled a small stuffed bear from the wagon, took a seat, and started softly talking to it as the cycle ran. From my seat across the laundromat, I could see that her clothes, jeans and a light pink jacket over a long-sleeved shirt, not nearly warm enough for the 20-degree weather, had seen better days. While they weren't dirty, they looked worn. She resembled a street urchin, yet there was a calm about her that seemed out of place. I couldn't believe a parent would send a child this young alone to do laundry. As a parent myself, I sensed something was off about the situation, which brought me back to my own situation. My kids were likely still sleeping, nestled in their warm beds at my old home. When they woke up, maybe an hour or two later, their mom, my ex-wife, would likely have a hot breakfast of pancakes or bacon ready. My 13-year-old son, Ethan, loves bacon, while my 15-year-old daughter, Haley, prefers pancakes. I used to love waffles, but those cozy family breakfasts were quickly becoming faded memories. In the divorce, my ex-wife got custody of the kids, and even though I had visitation rights, she turned them against me, blaming me for our broken family. My kids wanted nothing to do with me and made that clear the few times we were together. My crime? Not sitting by while my wife planned to cheat on me with another man during a couple's weekend getaway, a wealthy guy who routinely slept with other men's wives. She'd told me her plan, insisting it wouldn't be cheating since she was upfront about it, and afterward, she'd come back faithful to me. But she warned that if I resisted, she'd take half my money, half my things, the house, and would ruin my relationship with the kids. When I refused, she followed through, putting all the blame on me. The kids believed her completely. I was left with nothing. Thinking about those family breakfasts made me realize how hungry I was since I hadn't eaten anything since the last Brat and Mickey's malt at the bar where I'd been watching the Knicks game. On one wall was a shabby vending machine with a Coke machine next to it. I was sure the laundromat's owner must collect the money from both daily, or they'd have been broken into by now. I bought a pack of M&Ms and a Diet Coke. As I grabbed the soda, I glanced over at the little girl. She seemed to be watching me, but then I realized it was actually my snacks that held her attention. As a dad myself, seeing the look on her face as she eyed my snacks tugged at my heart. I walked over to her and quietly asked if she'd like my Diet Coke and M&Ms. She perked up, sitting up straight, but then her face fell, and she declined. "Mommy says I'm not supposed to take food from strangers, especially men," she explained. "That's a great rule, and you should always listen to your mom," I agreed. "Tell you what, I'll just leave the soda and M&Ms on the chair next to you, and you can take them if you want. I'll go grab myself more and head back to my seat." I set the snacks down, got another Diet Coke and M&Ms from the machines, and returned to my seat, casually watching her over the top of my paper. About 5 minutes later, she picked up the soda and M&Ms and dug in. I smiled to myself. I left about 90 minutes later after folding my laundry and loading it into the car, fully preoccupied with my own plans for the rest of the day. I didn't think about her again until the following Sunday at the laundromat around 7 a.m., when I wondered if she'd show up again. Sure enough, about a half hour later, she arrived, pulling the wagon heaped with clothes once more. I held the door open and she thanked me before heading to the machines along the back wall. I noticed she was wearing the same clothes as the previous week. Once she started her load, I approached cautiously, sitting down beside her. "I noticed you're having trouble with a back wheel on your wagon. Would it be okay if I tried to fix it?" She nodded, playing with her bear. I flipped the wagon over and saw the back right wheel had bent on its axle. I straightened it out by hand, then rolled the wagon back and forth to check. "Fixed." My little friend looked impressed. "I'm Alex Rogers, by the way," I said, holding out my hand. She extended hers with all the dignity she could muster and replied solemnly, "Maddie Ruiz, very pleased to meet you, sir." "Well, now that we've met, we're not strangers anymore," I said. "How about a soda and some candy?" "Could I have a real Coke this time?" she asked, her eyes wide with hope. "Sure thing. One real Coke for you, a Diet Coke for me, and M&Ms for both of us." We sat and talked for almost 2 hours. I fetched a pad and pen from my car to teach her tic-tac-toe. She picked it up quickly, and I let her win a few times, just like I used to with my kids. I drifted off for a minute, thinking about playing games with my children. Then my thoughts wandered to the memory of my then-wife, Tracy, looking me in the eye and telling me she planned to spend the night with Robert Goldstein III, a big city lawyer, on the night my life as I knew it ended. "It's just one night, Alex. It won't mean anything. It'll just be physical," she'd said. "What? Are you serious?" "It's not just physical. It'll be the end of our marriage," I shouted back. "Don't be like that, Alex," she'd argued. "Don't throw away 18 years over one night. I could have done this behind your back, and you'd never have known. Just let me have this." Then, taking Robert's hand, she'd gone with him to his room in the cottage. I stood there, stunned for what felt like hours, but was probably just a minute before gathering my things and leaving. "Alex, it's your turn." Maddie's voice pulled me back to the present. I marked an X in one of the boxes, giving her the chance to get 3 O's in a row for the win. She proudly drew a line through her trio. "High five, kid," I said, holding my hand up out of her reach. She looked at me, then stood on her chair to reach my hand and complete the high five. "Gotcha," she said with a grin. I stayed at the laundromat until Maddie's clothes were washed and folded. I offered to drive her home, but she declined, saying, "Mom's rules." "Your mom sounds smart. I'd like to meet her someday," I said. "Well, maybe someday. She doesn't go out much," Maddie replied. As winter turned to spring and then summer, my routine with Maddie continued. I started bringing a small bag with a sandwich for each of us, along with some snacks, and would buy the soda at the laundromat. I wasn't really hungry that early, but I figured if I ate a sandwich, she would too. She was so thin. Soon I began packing an extra sandwich, telling her it was for her mom. She never refused, always thanking me politely. By this time, Maddie had told me she was 7 years old and would be starting second grade in our neighborhood elementary school in the fall. There was no father in her life. She had never even met him. Her mother worked part-time during school hours, though Maddie didn't know the details. Her mom was always home when Maddie got back from school. They mostly stayed indoors, going to the park occasionally when the weather allowed. She mentioned watching a lot of TV, and she was familiar with all the recent animated movies, though I couldn't name a single one. Money seemed tight for them, but Maddie said her mom sometimes went on dates on Saturday nights, leaving her after dinner with instructions to put herself to bed by 9 p.m. On Sunday mornings, her mom would give her money for one washer and dryer load and send her off to the laundromat with her little wagon. Truthfully, my life wasn't much better than Maddie's at this point, although I at least had enough to live on. With child support, mortgage, and alimony, my salary as a lead computer programmer didn't stretch far. My social life was limited to the occasional night at a bar with friends. I didn't date anymore, and I didn't miss it. What I missed was my kids. Until I remembered how they'd treated me after Tracy and I separated. I preferred thinking of happier memories with them, though reality always seemed to jolt me back. "Where are you?" Tracy yelled when I answered my phone the morning after I'd left Robert Goldstein's lake house. My phone said 10:06. The last time I'd checked, it was 2:13, and I'd been pouring another shot of Eagle Rare bourbon. I must have eventually crashed in the bedroom. "You left me stranded here at the lake house. How am I supposed to get home?" she demanded. "Find a ride with Robert Goldstein III. I snapped back and hung up on her, frustrated that hanging up on a cell didn't have the same impact as slamming down a landline would have. The next Sunday, Maddie arrived about 15 minutes later than usual, this time without her wagon of clothes. Tears streaked her face, and I worried she'd been robbed. She clutched her teddy bear under her arm. "Mommy didn't come home last night, and I don't have any money for the laundry machines," she said when I walked over. "Does that happen sometimes?" I asked gently. She shook her head, her big brown eyes filling with tears. "Mommy always comes home. It's one of her rules." I calmed her down and gave her the food I'd brought for her. I was in unfamiliar territory here and wasn't sure what to do. "Is there someone you can stay with until your mom comes back?" I asked. She shook her head no, with a mouthful of peanut butter and jelly. I knew I couldn't leave her alone in her apartment, but if I called the authorities without a plan, she'd likely be in foster care within a day, and her mother might lose custody if they decided she wasn't providing adequately. I already had my doubts about her situation. "How about we go to your apartment and leave a note for your mom saying we're at my place? She can call me when she's back and I'll bring you home." She seemed to weigh this option carefully. It was against her mom's rules, but with her mother not home, she didn't seem eager to spend the day alone. She finally nodded in agreement. After folding my clothes and putting them in the car, we headed to her apartment. We didn't gather much since there wasn't much to gather. Her few clothes were either on her or among the laundry waiting to be washed. I told her we'd stop somewhere, and I'd get her a few things, including a toothbrush and hairbrush. She gave me a small, sad smile. I left a note with my name and number on the kitchen table. Then we went to get Maddie a few necessities. I let Maddie pick out a few tops, jeans, some underwear, and socks at a nearby Dollar General. She was absolutely delighted, but I couldn't stop wondering what I'd do if her mother didn't come back soon. We spent the day watching cartoons in the Disney Channel. I made us lunch and dinner, then put her to bed on the sofa in my spare room at 9 p.m. I planned to take a personal day from work the next day to figure things out. On Monday, Maddie and I returned to her apartment after lunch, but there was no sign that anyone had been there since we left the day before. I searched around and found a drawer in her mother's dresser with some paperwork. Among the useful items, I found Maddie's birth certificate, which didn't list a father. Her mother's name was Fiona Ruiz. I also found a photo of Maddie and her mother. The photo seemed to be taken when Maddie was around 2 years old, just a toddler. They were hugging for the camera. Fiona, with the same long, curly brown hair as Maddie, looked to be in her mid-20s. Both were smiling, but Fiona's eyes held a hint of sadness and exhaustion. I wondered if that look had deepened over the years. Maddie quietly watched me go through her mother's things. I tried to keep the conversation light, explaining that I was looking for something that could help us find her mom. She seemed to accept that explanation. Back at my apartment, I turned on the Disney Channel and settled Maddie in front of the TV. Then, I went to my room, called the police, and reported Fiona Ruiz missing. I didn't have much information for the officer, only that I felt something serious must have happened for her to leave her child alone. "And is the child alone in the apartment now, sir?" the officer asked. "No, she's with me. I'm about the closest friend she has, and I'd be happy to keep her with me until things are sorted out." "If you're willing to do that until Child Services contacts you, we'd appreciate it," the officer replied. I worried about Maddie ending up in foster care. From what I'd heard, foster care wasn't always a positive experience, and I knew I could provide for her if I was allowed to. While considering my options, I remembered that my boss's wife, Darlene, had connections in social services. Maybe I could ask for a favor. I'd worked for my boss for 20 years, and we'd developed a strong professional relationship. He and Darlene had been supportive during my divorce, so I felt comfortable reaching out. Darlene Laster arrived at my apartment about 20 minutes after I spoke with her husband, saying she wanted to make a new friend. I introduced her to Maddie, and within 5 minutes, Darlene had Maddie enchanted, and vice versa. After an hour, Darlene hugged me and promised she'd do everything possible to help keep Maddie with me. Later that day, 2 police officers stopped by. They didn't seem very optimistic about finding Fiona Ruiz. I gave them a copy of the photo of Maddie and her mother. On Tuesday, I returned to work and enrolled Maddie in our company's daycare program. Darlene had helped set it up about 15 years ago. I hadn't needed it for my kids since Tracy stayed home with them. But now, as a single parent, it was a lifesaver. Until school began, I'd bring Maddie to work with me each morning, have lunch with her, and take her home at night. It turned out to be a great setup. Having Maddie around eased the pain of my own kids' absence. I rarely saw them, and when I did, it was typically just for a meal at a restaurant. I never brought Maddie along, leaving her with a neighbor, Mrs. Olivares, so my kids wouldn't show her the hostility they showed me. Maddie was a refreshing presence in my life. She and her mother didn't get out much due to limited funds, so everything we did together felt like a new adventure to her. The first time we went to a sit-down restaurant, someplace nicer than McDonald's, she was captivated, as if visiting another world. When we went to the park and I bought her a pretzel and soda after she played, she acted as if it was the grandest treat. Her smile lasted a whole week, and I smiled right along with her, listening to her excitement. She began teaching me Spanish. She was bilingual, and she'd laugh heartily at my frequent mix-ups. Once I accidentally ordered a horse and a Coke at McDonald's, and she laughed so hard that she had tears in her eyes. In her innocent way, it never occurred to her that most people didn't speak 2 languages. I kept Maddie in her previous school for 2nd grade since it was the simplest option for the school system. With her birth certificate in hand, they didn't ask many questions when I listed myself as her contact and used my apartment as her address. I never heard anything further from the police about Maddie's mother, nor from any social services about placing Maddie in foster care. Either Darlene pulled some serious strings, or the city had so many open cases they didn't focus on Maddie and me. With Maddie staying with me, my cooking skills improved, because grabbing a pizza and beer wasn't a suitable dinner anymore. We began watching cooking shows together and tackled recipes as a team in the kitchen. I never cooked with my own kids. Tracy was a fantastic cook. But with Maddie's help, I was learning and even enjoying it. We had a blast in the kitchen together. I won't pretend everything was perfect. We had our disagreements and challenges like any other family, but that was just it, like any other family. After being together a little over a year, Maddie and I had formed our own version of a family. I realized just how strong our bond had become at the start of her 3rd grade year during a school open house. While walking through the hallway, we met one of Maddie's friends and her parents. Maddie's friend introduced her parents as my mom and dad, and then Maddie introduced me as her dad. I hadn't thought about us in that way, and hearing her call me Dad filled me with indescribable joy. I choked up, claiming I had something caught in my throat. Maddie noticed, giving me a knowing look and squeezing my hand. From then on, she never called me Alex, and I couldn't have been happier. I was so wrapped up in being a parent again that I didn't even notice I hadn't dated in over 2 years, until Maddie brought it up one day at the grocery store. We were walking down the aisles when we passed a petite woman in the produce section. I didn't think anything of it, but Maddie did a double take. "Wow, Dad, that's a really pretty woman. You should ask her for a date," Maddie said. I was checking the shopping list and stopped, taking a good look at the woman. She was indeed beautiful. She happened to look up right then, and we exchanged a shy smile. "Well, aren't you going to talk to her, Dad?" Maddie asked, looking expectantly at both of us. I wanted the ground to swallow me up, but decided to give it a shot. "Hi, I'm Alex. This is Maddie. As you just heard, Maddie thinks I should ask you out or something," I said, stumbling over my words. "What do you think?" she asked, meeting my eyes with a warm smile. I stammered, completely captivated by her caramel-colored skin, bright smile, and kind eyes. She looked about 5'2", maybe 110 pounds, around 35 years old. Though she wore a light jacket, I could tell she had a nice figure. and I noticed her left hand was ring-free. I wondered if Maddie had spotted that detail. Would you like to have dinner with us sometime? All of us? Or just you and me, if you prefer? Smooth move, Romeo, Maddie teased in Spanish. That's a clever way to have your daughter scout for you in the grocery store, the woman joked as I turned red. No, honestly, this wasn't planned. I'd never do that. Sure, Romeo, whatever you say. But yes, I'd love to have dinner with both of you. I'm Cherry Roberts, by the way. Seriously? It was that easy? I should have had Maddie helping me ages ago, I said, chuckling. We planned dinner for the following Saturday. She liked Italian, so Maddie and I prepared some of our favorite recipes. After exchanging numbers and giving her my address, Maddie and I finished shopping and fist-bumped as we rounded the corner. Yeah, no setup, right? She called after us. The week dragged on until Saturday finally arrived. Maddie and I cleaned the apartment, then got to work making homemade lasagna, garlic breadsticks, salad, and tortoni for dessert. Cooking helped settle my nerves, because, truthfully, I was as nervous as could be. It had been over 20 years since my last date. Then it hit me hard. I hadn't dated in 20 years. My last dates were with Tracy, and I had to think to recall anyone before her. I think it was Marianne Rizzo. Last I'd heard, she married the next guy she dated after me. I wondered if they were still together, or if their marriage had ended like mine. Take it easy, man, I told myself. It's just a date. No need to think about marriage already. It wasn't just me who was excited about the evening. Maddie seemed just as energized. She stuck by my side, helping as we cleaned and cooked. I hadn't realized it until then, but Cherry was our first visitor who wasn't Mrs. Olivares or a child under 10. Dinner went well, in my opinion. It was a bit nerve-wracking initially, but having an 8-year-old around is a great icebreaker. My mom wasn't married either. Have you ever been married, Cherry? Maddie blurted out as I handed Cherry a glass of Galliano soon after she arrived. Cherry and I both blushed at Maddie's question. Then Cherry looked directly into Maddie's eyes and answered gently, I was married to a wonderful man, sweetheart. But that's in the past. For a moment, I saw a trace of sadness and pain in her expression. Dad used to be married too. And he has 2 other kids besides me, Maddie continued. I decided it was best to give Cherry a brief overview of my marriage, divorce, and how Maddie came to live with me. She listened quietly, her face reflecting empathy. She and Maddie both seemed emotional when I mentioned Maddie's mother not coming back. Maddie quickly lightened up and asked Cherry about her name. That's a cool name, Cherry. I bet your parents were a lot of fun, Maddie said. That's actually a funny story, Cherry replied. My real name is Marcella, and I used to go by Sella. But one day, my little brother spotted a box of Sella's chocolate-covered cherries in a store and started calling me Cherry. The name stuck, and now everyone calls me that. It fits you much better than Marcella, I chimed in. Marcella makes me picture thick glasses and a sturdy look. Ouch, that's harsh, Cherry laughed. You're never allowed to call me by my full name. Cherry stayed with us until Maddie's bedtime at 9, then said it was time for her to go. I hoped she genuinely enjoyed herself, as she suggested that next time we should have dinner at her place. She gave me a quick kiss on the lips as she left. For a fleeting moment, I thought I caught a hint of attraction in the air, but maybe it was just wishful thinking. I like her, Dad. I think she'd be a good fit with us, Maddie said after I closed the door. I had to admit to myself that the kid might be onto something. For the next 5 Saturdays, we had family date nights, and I think we all enjoyed them. But I knew I needed to try going out with Cherry alone to see where things might lead. Maddie took it well when I told her I was taking Cherry out to a restaurant, just the 2 of us, and that she'd spend the evening with Mrs. Olivares. I wasn't about to leave her home alone as her mother had done. I would never criticize Maddie's mom directly to her, but leaving an 8-year-old alone while going on a date was not something I'd ever do. Maddie and I both understood all too well that things hadn't gone well the last time she'd been left alone. For our alone date, as Maddie called it, I made reservations at a nice steakhouse. I could tell the mood would be different as soon as I arrived at Cherry's door. She wore a silky fitted dress with a bit of a neckline and a length that made her short legs look a little longer. She wore a touch more makeup than usual and a new, subtly spicy perfume. Wow, and I forgot to bring my shield. How am I going to fend off all the other men tonight? I joked. If you think that smooth talk will get you anywhere, well, you just might be right, she replied with a laugh. We had a wonderful meal and shared a more adult conversation without Maddie there, though it felt strange not to have her along. You're missing her, aren't you? Cherry asked, looking directly into my eyes. Kind of, I admitted. We're together all the time outside of work and school, and I don't mind one bit. You must miss your older kids too, she added. Terribly. But with the attitude they've shown since the split, it's hard. They don't seem willing to see things from my perspective. My ex has really turned them against me. You seem like you'd make a great dad, she said. If you don't mind me asking, how come you never had kids? I don't mind, she replied. We were thinking about it until I made the biggest mistake of my life. I disrespected my marriage and had an affair purely for the excitement. It was a foolish decision that tore apart the person I loved most in the world. I'll never make that mistake again if I'm ever given a chance to love someone that way again. Cherry's voice faded as she said the last part, but I caught every word of her barely audible whisper. Her eyes filled with tears, which she tried to blink away. I handed her my napkin, and she gently dabbed at her eyes. I'm sorry if I brought you somewhere you'd rather not go, I said softly. I've never actually talked about it with anyone before, she admitted. Not even my parents. I'm just so ashamed. Well, enough heavy talk, I said. Let's get out of here and see if you've got any moves on the dance floor, Missy. Missy, do I look 12 to you? She joked. Actually, I guessed 35. But since I'm 44, you're practically a kid to me, I replied. Really? 35? She sounded genuinely pleased. I'm actually 42. I was married for 12 years and I've been divorced for 9. You're really great for a girl's ego. No way you're only 2 years younger than me. I look like I could practically be your older brother, I laughed. I paid the check and we headed to a dance club that Tracy and I used to visit sometimes. I'm no Fred Astaire, but Tracy enjoyed dancing, so one of the first things I did when we had some extra money was to take dance lessons. I learned quickly that watching your wife dance with other men from the sidelines didn't make for a fun night. Cherry was light on her feet and just as easy on the eyes. We danced to both fast and slow songs for about half an hour before I needed a break. Cherry looked like she could have kept going, but she followed me off the floor, and we found a stand-up table. I headed to the bar, and as soon as I left, the first vulture swooped in. I watched from the corner of my eye, trying to stay subtle. Cherry laughed at something he said. He must have been somewhat funny. But she didn't move from the table, which pleased me more than a little. When I handed her the margarita I'd brought back, she took a sip. Soon after, vulture number 2 approached, a guy around 25 who nodded at me but then turned straight to Cherry to ask if she wanted to dance. Excuse me, but the lady is with me. I don't appreciate disrespect, especially from kids, I said calmly but firmly, keeping a smile on my face. I knew that smile didn't reach my eyes, and he seemed to catch the hint. Sorry, man, I didn't realize you two were together, he mumbled, backing off. We finished our drinks and headed back to the dance floor, staying out there for another 30 minutes. At one point, another young guy tried to cut in, but he had the sense to ask me first. When I told him no, he nodded, shook my hand, and said, Can't blame a guy for trying. She's beautiful. We returned to our table for another drink. As we were finishing, yet another guy approached, asking if he could dance with Cherry. I was tired, but figured that if she wanted to keep dancing, I'd let her go. She shook her head, and I broke the news to him. Afterward, I took her home, and she invited me in for a bit since it was only 10:30. I accepted, and we each had a glass of wine, chatting comfortably for another hour. When I finally stood to leave, she stood with me, and I must have looked hesitant because she gave me a little giggle, the sound of which I was really beginning to love. I blushed, and she could see I was in deep. Don't worry, Alex. There's no rush here, is there? She said softly. 2 weeks later, I broke my 2-year dry spell in my bedroom. It wasn't anything wild. Maddie was asleep in the next room, but I can't express how good it felt to be with someone again. It didn't last long, but Cherry seemed just fine with that, especially since I'd made sure she was fully satisfied before I was. The experience felt as natural as riding a bike. Though I hadn't planned on it, Cherry ended up spending the night. She curled up against my chest and we both slept soundly. In the morning, she slipped on one of my white dress shirts, covering what was necessary but still looking effortlessly attractive. We went to the kitchen and soon Maddie joined us, squealing when she saw Cherry was still there. She ran over and leaped into Cherry's arms, almost knocking her over. They hugged, clearly thrilled to see each other. I couldn't help rolling my eyes at the sappy sweetness of it. Pancakes! Pancakes! They both shouted together. Chocolate chip pancakes! I called back. 6 months later, Cherry moved in with us, and we became our own version of a 21 St. Century family. Despite still paying alimony and child support, I made a decent living, and Cherry worked at an accounting firm, so we were doing well. Maddie never went without, though she rarely asked for much anyway. Growing up with little made her appreciative of everything she had, and in her eyes, it seemed like more than enough. After all, everything is relative. While we might have been a modern-day version of the Brady Bunch, We looked more like a current take on The Odd Couple, or, in our case, The Odd Trio. We were black, white, and Hispanic, each with a different last name. Some of that changed when I registered Maddie for 4th grade that fall. I listed her as Maddie Ruiz Rogers. She was with me at registration, and her eyes lit up when she saw what I'd written. She didn't say anything until we left the school, and then she nearly burst with excitement. "I can be a Rogers like you, really?" she squealed. "Not legally, at least for a few more years," I answered. "But by Rogers rules, you're eligible to join the club." I made air quotes around Rogers rules, but that didn't hold her back. She jumped into my arms and started kissing my cheeks. After a few seconds of celebrating, Maddie pulled back with a thoughtful look. I was surprised until she spoke up. "When does Cherry get to be a Rogers?" she asked. "You know, that's a great question. I'm going to have to think about that seriously." And I did. In fact, on the 1-year anniversary of our first date, I had Maddie stay with Mrs. Olivares while I went to the jeweler I used to visit when buying gifts for Tracy. Cherry had told me she'd be home late and would grab her own dinner, so I figured I had a couple of hours to pick out the perfect ring. It was a little after 6 when I left Jean Horowitz Jewelers, having just designed a custom engagement ring with Jean's daughter, Jolene. I called in a pizza order for Maddie, Mrs. Olivares, and myself and drove over to my favorite pizza place in a small shopping center. As I was about to step out of the car, I noticed a small but stylish restaurant a few doors down, and that's when my world seemed to collapse for the second time. Walking into the restaurant, hand in hand with a good-looking man in his 40s, was Cherry. She looked animated and genuinely happy. I sat there staring, unable to move, or breathe, or think. I don't know how long I sat in my car before realizing I hadn't taken a breath in a while and was on the verge of passing out. I took a few deep breaths, then decided I needed to get Maddie's dinner. So I went in, picked up the pizza, and drove home in a fog. I barely remember the evening until Cherry came home around 8. She was still lively and seemed to be in a great mood as she walked through the door. "Hey, you're never going to guess who I ran into tonight. My brother John surprised me by coming into town without telling me, and after I finished work, he took me out to dinner. I figured since you guys were having pizza, it'd be fine for me to catch up with him." Cherry stopped speaking when she saw the look on my face. "That's the story you're going with?" I asked quietly. Cherry looked stunned, replaying my words in her mind. "You went to Salvatore's for pizza tonight, and you saw me with him, didn't you? And you thought, 'You've got to be kidding me!'" she yelled. I was caught off guard. I'd expected guilt or an apology, not anger. This didn't feel like any apology I'd ever experienced. Cherry had never raised her voice at me, but now I could see she might have a good reason. "You don't even trust me enough to give me the benefit of the doubt," she continued. "I know I lost my husband because I cheated on him. I told you that, all of it, and I told you I'd never make that mistake again. I understand your ex-wife left you with trust issues, but that's between you and her. Don't ever treat me that disrespectfully again, or I'll be gone before you can blink." I noticed Mrs. Olivares had quietly let herself out when Cherry started yelling, and I saw Maddie retreating to her room. I wished the sofa would just swallow me up, but no such luck. "You're right," I admitted softly. "I let the distrust that Tracy left me with spill over onto you. You are your own person, and if I can't respect that, then I don't deserve you." I hadn't planned to tell her about the ring just yet, but after such a major mistake, I had to go all in. Cherry was glaring at me with a look that could have knocked me over. "So, I know this isn't the best timing, but I need to show you how much I really do value you. Give me your left hand." She slowly came over and held out her hand, palm up. I gently turned it palm down, slipped a piece of paper around her ring finger, and secured it with a rubber band from my pocket. She looked confused. "What?" she began, pulling the paper off her finger and unfolding it to read. "You lousy jerk," she squealed. "Seriously?" Cherry then gave me the most passionate kiss I'd ever experienced, more intense than anything with Tracy. When we finally stopped, she called for Maddie to come out. "Look, baby, look," she said, showing Maddie the receipt for the ring. "I'm going to be a Rogers too." The joyful squeals of both Maddie and Cherry rang through the room in a pitch almost too high for comfort, but I held on as they danced around. After they settled down, Cherry pulled out her phone, grinned, and said, "You better come over here and meet your soon-to-be brother-in-law." Maddie ran to get Mrs. Olivares back so Cherry could show off her ring, and the apartment felt like Christmas morning chaos when Cherry's brother arrived. He was as strikingly handsome as Cherry was beautiful. Looking at him again, I couldn't help but feel relieved that he was her brother, not a suitor as I'd initially feared. After Cherry introduced us, he extended his hand but then pulled me into a bear hug. Handshakes are for friends, and while I hope we'll be friends, hugs are for family, he said. And they're also to show you that if you hurt her, I'll squeeze the life out of you. Got that? He tightened his grip slightly with that last part, and I got the message, loud and clear. Uh-huh, I whispered, a bit breathless. Cherry gave him the quick rundown of everything that had led to my giving her the ring. He looked at me with mock surprise, at least I hoped it was mock, and said he was glad I was still alive. She gave you that laser death stare, didn't she? John asked. Yeah, that look has been known to kill. Both Maddie and Mrs. Olivares chimed in that they were smart enough to leave the room when they saw it. Then John turned to Maddie, looked her over, and said, So this is the famous Maddie Rogers. I've always wanted some nieces and nephews. I think you'll do nicely. Maddie smiled shyly at first, then her face lit up. Does this mean I get to call you Mom? She asked Cherry. Cherry didn't respond with words. Instead, she dissolved into tears and reached for Maddie. The two stood there in a long embrace, each shedding their own tears for their own reasons. Even with Darlene's help, the state made us wait until Maddie turned 16 before we could legally adopt her. By that age, she could have filed for emancipation and gone off on her own, but neither Cherry nor I worried about that. The state's permission only formalized what Maddie, Cherry, and I had already built years before. Family isn't always about blood or legalities. Then, unexpectedly, I hadn't heard from either of my kids since our last meeting more than 6 years ago, so I was stunned to hear Haley's voice on the other end of the line. I hadn't checked the caller ID and answered as usual. Alex Rogers. Dad, it's me, Haley, she said quickly. Please don't hang up. Relax, kiddo. I would never hang up on you or your brother. Is something wrong? No, Dad. Everything's good. Really great. I'm getting married next month, and I'd like to invite you to the wedding. I was speechless. This was my little girl, yet I was so out of touch that I hadn't even met the man she was marrying in just 1 month. The last time I spoke with my kids was just after Ethan's 16th birthday. We went to his favorite restaurant to celebrate, but neither of them seemed interested in conversation despite my attempts. Finally, just after ordering dessert, Ethan spoke up. Dad, I'm 16 now, and the court-ordered visits are over. Haley and I don't have to see you anymore if we don't want to. And we talked it over. We don't want to see you. You left us to keep your pride intact. Well, you can take your pride and shove it. I had to give it to him. He kept calm, though he couldn't quite meet my eyes. Haley just glanced back and forth between us, unsure. I sighed, knowing this moment would come. This was Tracy's doing. It had her influence all over it. I'm assuming you know what wedding vows are, and that your mother not only broke ours, she threw them in my face. But she's convinced you both that I'm the bad guy, and nothing I say will change that. But to me, breaking our vows isn't something I can just ignore, like a dent in the car. It cut right to my core. While I knew that leaving would hurt you, staying would have been worse because it would have destroyed who I am. You'd eventually see the difference and understand it someday. This was your mother's mistake, and she's made me the scapegoat. I won't take that blame. But if this is truly what you want, Dad, Haley's voice brought me back to the present. Don't you want to come? Very much so, Haley. I've even saved up for this day. You don't have to worry about the money, Dad. Bob has it covered. Bob? I asked, piecing it together. Is this Robert Goldstein III? Her tone grew a bit frustrated, then softened with pity. Apparently you didn't know. Mom married Bob about 6 years ago after we stopped seeing you. So the man who ruined my marriage, broke my relationship with my kids, nearly drained me financially, and then marries my ex-wife? And you say it's all about my pride, Haley? Anytime Ethan wants to apologize... Don't be that way, Dad. I'm not inviting you to start trouble. You won't be giving me away or sitting up front with the family. I just want you there, okay? All right, Haley. On one condition, that I can bring my family with me. Your family? Yes, even someone like me gets to have a family, Haley. I have a wonderful wife and an amazing daughter. You'd like them if you got to know them. Haley seemed taken aback. I'd never told her or Ethan about Cherry and Maddie. I hadn't wanted Tracy to find out. You have another kid? Does she know about me and Ethan? She asked, sounding almost in a daze. Maddie's 16. She's adopted. She's been with me for 9 years. I almost literally found her on the street. She knows all about you both, what we once had, and what we don't have now. She's fun, full of life. She went through her own hardship, and we helped each other at a really low time in our lives, almost as if it were meant to be. Well, then, I look forward to meeting the rest of the family, Haley said, seeming to come to terms with the news. The wedding took place on a Saturday evening at a rather upscale venue, fitting for the daughter of a well-established lawyer. I had to give Bob some credit. He hadn't cut corners for his stepdaughter's big day. The ceremony itself was held in a beautiful, historic church in the city. Cherry, Maddie, and I timed our arrival to just before the service started and took seats in the back row. This timing helped us avoid early socializing with old friends and family. And when Haley and her new husband Mark walked down the aisle after the ceremony, she blew me a kiss. At the reception, we arrived in time to claim a table toward the back of the hall. It may not have been entirely fair to Cherry and Maddie, who'd both put effort into their appearances. Friday was a girls' spa day, and they'd each bought new dresses. Cherry looked sophisticated and elegant, and Maddie, who wore full makeup for the first time, appeared 16 going on 21, the classic father's dilemma. But they respected my wishes, and didn't complain when we settled in with glasses of wine for Cherry and me, and a Coke for Maddie. As I'd anticipated, friends from the past gradually stopped by our table to say hello and catch up once they spotted me. Soon, Tracy's parents, Rhonda and William, joined us. Rhonda's eyes filled with tears as she leaned in for a hug, and William gave me a warmer handshake than he ever had when Tracy and I were married. I introduced them to Cherry and Maddie, and though both Rhonda and Bill seemed a bit uneasy, I figured that was understandable after an 18-year marriage to their daughter. Since I hadn't contributed to the wedding plans, I felt it was best not to work the room, so we stayed mostly at our table as others came to us. But I'm not blind. I noticed the glances from people who knew me as they registered that I was with a stunning black woman and a charming Hispanic young lady. The wives of old friends in particular seemed to react as if I'd brought a trophy date to the event. And right on cue, Tracy and Bob, our hosts for the evening, made their way over. After nearly 20 years of marriage, I knew every subtle expression of Tracy's personality, and from the first moment she laid eyes on Cherry, I could tell she wasn't pleased. Was Cherry perhaps too black for her liking? Maybe. Too beautiful? Almost certainly. Was she likely envious of Cherry's toned figure and youthful look? Absolutely. And the real issue was probably that, in Tracy's eyes, Cherry was simply the wrong woman to be with me. With her thoughts fixated on Cherry, Tracy hardly seemed to register that this was our first close encounter in nearly a decade. She almost appeared to wake up when I stepped in and gave her a light kiss on the cheek. "Oh, Alex, I'm sorry. I was having a little trouble balancing in these new heels," she explained. "No problem, babe. You're looking great," I fibbed. "Come on, meet the family." I introduced everyone, Cherry, Maddie, Tracy, and Bob, giving Bob as warm a handshake as I could muster, and introducing him as the one responsible for my eventual good fortune. Everyone except Maddie winced at that, but my daughter shot me a mischievous look and squeezed my elbow. Did I mention she's perceptive? We exchanged small talk for about 5 minutes, skimming over the surface of things before Tracy and Bob moved along, making room for the bride and her new husband. Maddie gave me a slight shake of her head, signaling she was just as unenthusiastic about the encounter as I was. My other daughter, the bride, greeted me far more warmly than I'd anticipated, wrapping me in a long hug and beginning to cry, while my new son-in-law, Cherry, and Maddie stood nearby. I was completely caught off guard, speechless until she let go. "I'm sorry, Daddy, for everything," she said, sniffling. "I never fully understood what you went through, until I said my own vows a couple of hours ago. Right there in the middle of it, it hit me like a ton of bricks. What it must have been like for you when Mom cheated and broke her vows. I never got it before. I blamed you for your stubborn pride, just like Ethan did. But now I understand. Completely. You were right to stand up for yourself. And she was so wrong, not only for what she did, but for blaming you. How can I ever make up for all the pain Ethan and I caused you?" A lump the size of a football formed in my throat. I hadn't cried since tearing my knee cartilage in 10th grade football, but I came close right then, standing there with family around. "Well, for starters, introduce me to this fine gentleman you made those vows with, and then grant me the honor of a dance," I replied. "Oh, right," she said, a bit sheepishly. "You haven't met the man of my dreams. Mark Westinghouse, meet your other father-in-law, Alex Rogers, my real dad." Mark and I shook hands with genuine warmth, and I carried out my fatherly duty by warning him to treat my daughter well. Then I introduced him and Haley to Cherry and Maddie. While they all got acquainted, the band struck up a tune. "Daddy?" Haley asked, nodding toward the dance floor. "Delighted," I replied, taking her arm. The crowd, already abuzz from Haley's warm welcome, grew even louder as I escorted her to the dance floor. I knew that by this point I was unintentionally upstaging Tracy and Bob, but I had a lot of years to make up for. The band was playing what I think of as kid music, which I usually can't stand. But after years of dancing with a wife who loved it, I'd learned the steps. Haley seemed surprised that her father was such a Renaissance man, and we stayed out for 2 songs. By then, a good portion of the guests had gathered to watch us. After the second song, Haley gave me a big hug, the crowd applauded, and Cherry and Maddie were waiting nearby with big smiles. I pulled them both onto the floor, and the 3 of us joined in with everyone else. "Well, look at you, Mr. Rhythm," Cherry teased in my ear when she danced close. "Who knew that marrying off a daughter could be this much fun?" I replied, then turned to Maddie. "But let's wait a few more years before we try it again. I don't think my heart can handle this much excitement." "Spin me, old man," Maddie grinned. The 3 of us stayed on the dance floor for another 6 songs, and then I left them to grab a Jack over ice and take a break at our table. Watching Cherry and Maddie enjoying themselves, I didn't notice Tracy sit down beside me until she touched my shoulder, a touch I recognized instantly. "This should have been our moment, not mine and Bob's," Tracy murmured near my ear. "You threw away 18 good years. For what? You clearly didn't love me enough." I kept my gaze forward, not turning to look at her. "No. You clearly didn't love me enough not to go through with it, especially after I told you what would happen if you did. You didn't love or respect me enough. But hey, you got Bob in the end, and he's quite the catch, right? And I ended up with Cherry and Maddie. As the Rolling Stones say, you can't always get what you want, but if you try, you get what you need. You were a jerk then, and you're a jerk now. Maybe, but I'm a happy jerk who hasn't lost a minute's sleep over your mistake. And no, I wasn't expecting an apology. I'm good. Ethan re-entered my life when he got serious with a woman a few years back. It seems that fidelity becomes a lot easier to grasp when you have your own commitment at stake, so to speak. He called me out of the blue saying we needed to talk, so I invited him over to the apartment. When I opened the door, he was holding a bottle of Jack Daniel's Tennessee Honey. "Haley said you really like this stuff and figured I should bring a peace offering," he said as I let him inside. We'd only had a brief and somewhat tense conversation at Haley's wedding over 2 years ago. Although Haley and I had since reconciled, Ethan and I hadn't bridged that gap. "I asked my girlfriend Sasha to marry me, and it got me thinking about you and Mom," he began. "Haley's been telling me for a couple of years that you were the one who got hurt, not Mom. But I didn't fully understand until Sasha and I had the talk about trust and fidelity. I'm sorry, Dad. I was completely wrong. I get it now. I just didn't want to feel like I was betraying Mom. I never asked you or Haley to take sides," I replied. "I just wanted you to understand why I had to leave, why I had no choice." We talked about everything over the next few hours, helped along by that bottle of whiskey. Cherry prepared a fantastic dinner, and the 4 of us spent the evening catching up. Ethan ended up sleeping on the couch because Cherry wouldn't let him drive after splitting a bottle with me. For this wedding, Cherry, Maddie, and I were seated at the groom's family table, joined by Haley, Mark, and our 2-year-old grandson, Brent, who sat next to Tracy. That arrangement kept Tracy included, especially now that she was alone. Bob had left her for a younger trophy wife about a year ago. Over time, the kids kept me updated on Tracy with brief snippets, but I told them it wasn't their job to be a communication link between us. We were both adults, and if one of us wanted to share something, we could pick up the phone ourselves. Maddie had flown in for the wedding. She's a freshman at Michigan State, but she didn't want to miss her big brother's big day, so I flew her in. She, Ethan, and Haley have developed a close bond, close enough that they can joke with her about being my favorite child. Watching the 3 of them together is interesting. The nature versus nurture argument seems to hold true in our case. Maddie and I share an unbreakable bond that even Cherry has noticed. Although I wouldn't wish our early hardships on anyone, those challenges have brought us closer than we might otherwise be. Adversity has likely brought Cherry and me closer too. We both understand that nothing should be taken for granted, and we cherish our time together as we navigate life as empty nesters. Cherry quickly figured out that an empty nest means no one in the next room to overhear, and she's definitely loosened up a bit in the bedroom. Hearing her express such pleasure nearly drives me into a frenzy, making me want to please her even more. Some mornings, we both head to work a bit stiff and sore from a lively night. After we'd taken care of the usual reception duties, Cherry and I hit the dance floor. Maddie joined in too, dancing with one of Ethan's groomsmen, but not before Ethan warned him not to mess with my dad's favorite child, a comment that made me grin. After about 6 dances, I started heading back to the table, but Maddie stopped me for one more dance. I couldn't help noticing that Cherry and Tracy had exchanged no words, even though they were within easy talking distance. "Feel the chill coming from that side of the room?" Maddie asked, as she came close enough to speak, perceptive as always. When I finally returned to the table, Cherry got up and joined Maddie on the dance floor. A minute later, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Round two, I thought. Well, aren't you going to gloat about Bob leaving me? Tracy asked as she leaned in. Not my circus, not my monkeys, I replied. This might surprise you, but I hardly think of you at all. I don't wish you harm, but I couldn't care less about your life now. We had 18 years together, and that ended long ago. I have a pretty good life now, and I choose not to dwell on the past or what might have been. I'd been watching the dance floor while talking, but now I turned to face Tracy. That's when I saw it, a trace of fear in her eyes. Fear of facing the later years of her life alone. It was just one more thing she hadn't considered back then, likely because she'd assumed I'd back down under her threats during the divorce. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, but then realized that if the roles were reversed, she'd be trying to break my spirit without hesitation. You know, I was on a hole then, and I'm still on a hole, I said, getting up from the table and joining my girls on the dance floor.